Hey guys, today we're going to take a look at building a start page for our e-learning project. Here's what the final product will look like, and we'll take a look at how to build that now. You'll notice we have a blank project open. So the first thing you'll want to do is get a background. You can use a solid color by putting a square on the slide and adjusting it to the color you'd like. You can design it with your own shapes, or really however you want to do it. But if possible, I like to find a picture that correlates to the learning. A great resource I always use is Pixabay. There's a ton of free resources on here that are Creative Commons Zero, which basically means that they're free to use. Just pay attention to what kind of copyright license is on each image. You just want to make sure that if your learning is going to utilize cartoon images, your title slide should also be a cartoon style, and vice versa. Personally, I wouldn't use a hyper-real image and then place cartoons on top. Once you find an image, just save it to your computer. A good technique to practice is, if you're going to use an image, keep a Word file or notepad with the image link and date you found it, because copyright is a huge deal and you just want to keep yourself safe. I'll put a link to Pixabay as well as a link to the different Creative Commons licensing in the description. So now that we have our picture that we'd like to use, we can select Media, click Image, and locate the image we just saved. Selecting the image will bring the image onto our canvas, and if you're lucky, you can just hold the Shift button on a PC and drag the corner until it fills the page. If your image is a little too big, really, as long as you know where your canvas is when you're building, it's okay, because when we preview it, anything not on the canvas won't show. However, if you'd like to clean up your workspace, you can click on the picture, and under the Properties tab, you can select Edit Image. Then we can select the Crop Radio button and crop a portion of the picture. We can hit OK, and now the picture better fits our canvas. Once we have the background image set up the way we'd like it, we want to have it selected and come up to the top right and name it. We can just call it background, but naming is a very important part and will come in handy later if you're working on a timeline or doing variable work. After we name it, we want to come down to the timeline and lock the background by selecting Lock. This is just so we don't accidentally grab it and keep moving it around. I can't tell you how many times I've done that on projects. Now that we have a background, we want to add our title. Since our background is decently bold, we want our text to stand out, so I'm just going to add a little rectangle to tell the user where to focus. We come up here and click Shapes and select the Rectangle tool. Then we just draw a rectangle. You can place it wherever you want, but I like to right-click on it and select a line and do both horizontal and vertical. That way it centers the block for me on the screen. Then we'll just come up in the top right quick and name it. While staying in the Properties tab, you can adjust yours to whatever color you'd like. I'm going to leave mine black and just lower the opacity a little bit so the rectangle doesn't look so harsh on the screen. I'm going to lower it to 75%, and I'm also going to take the stroke width down to 1. That's the border around the rectangle. So now that looks pretty good, and our next step would be to add the text. So we'll come up to our text tool and select Text Caption. Then we can just quickly come over to the properties and name it. We can also change the text color to white, and if you want, you can change the font, add bold, italics, underline, or whatever you'd like. I'm just going to set the text size to 28. Then we can just click our text box and start typing a title that relates to our learning. I'm going to bring in the text box a little bit to fit our text better. I think it just makes it easier when you're trying to maneuver it and select it. We'll get that centered on our slide, and we'll just use the up arrow to move it wherever we'd like. Then we can add another text box and just make sure this one's a little bit smaller text size. I'm going to name it Description and put a small blurb about the learning. We'll just quickly align that one right underneath the title. So now all we really need is a start button. So this step's pretty easy. We'll come up to Interactions and select Button. We'll come over to the Properties tab and name it right away. You can do BTN for button _ start, so we know that it's the start button. Then if we come down to the Style tab, right now it's set to Text button, which is just a standard button that you can throw in there. You can use an image button, but for this tutorial, we're going to use a transparent button. So we don't want it to say button, so we're going to change the caption to say start. Then for the fill, we want to use a color that corresponds with our background. So I'll go into the fill and select the eyedropper tool. I really like that blue in the ocean, so we'll just select that, and you'll see our button now has the same color of the ocean. This is going to be a really useful tool when you want to keep your color schemes. We'll set the stroke and text to white. And I like to add an outer shadow effect, just for some depth. Now we can just maneuver the button to where we like it on the screen. We can line it up with the title. So now we're going to check on the button's actions. It's set to go to next slide, which is good. That's what we want. One thing I always do is come down to display and select hand cursor and disable click sound. The hand cursor just means that when the user hovers over it, their cursor will become a hand, indicating that they can click on it. And honestly, I just disable the click sound simply because I hate the click noise that the button makes when it's clicked. Really now you're good to go. We can give it a test quick. We can come up to the slide button and select blank slide so we can know that our start button works. Then we can go ahead and select preview them project. You'll see our start screen looks pretty good and our start button works if we click it. So you have a start screen here. If that's what you want to use, that's fine. But if you want to make it a little bit more flashy, we can add some animation to it. So this is why naming things is important. We're going to come down to the timeline and edit the entrance sequence of the items. A simple fade animation can have a lot of effect in the training. So you'll first unlock the background so we can edit it. Then while it's selected, we will go to the timing tab and go down to transition. We can set it to fade in. We can play with the length of the time it takes. Honestly, 0.5 is pretty quick, but we don't want it to take forever. So I'll just set it to 1 second by simply clicking on it and typing it in. Then we can go ahead and do that for all the items on the screen. Except for the button. For reasons unknown to me, you can't add a fade to the button. So a workaround I do is pretty simple, and I'll show you now. We just come over to the timing tab, and under effects, we can select alpha from to, which means it's going from an initial opacity to a final one. So we can set the initial alpha to 0% and final to 100%. And since our other fade-ins were 1 second, we can set that here in effect duration. So if we preview it now, it doesn't look bad, but everything fades in at the same time. So if we come back down to the timeline, simply by offsetting the entrance times of the different items, we can make it look a lot nicer. So we can just take each item and drag it over by about half a second. Make sure when they're appearing, they're in the correct order. So now, if we take a look at the preview, I think it looks pretty good. There you go. You have a start screen for your project. If you guys have any comments or questions, feel free to leave me a comment or send me an email if there's anything specific you guys want to see with Captivate.